Hello and welcome to ClapperCast. I'm your host as always, Carson Timar, and today to kick off our slate for 2025, myself and the good old Nicolò Grasso are back to review Robert Eggers' Nosferatu, a passion project for the director. This is the film that we were both really excited for. We both love the silent original, we love Herzog's version, and I'm very happy to report that we are very happy with Eggers' version. Today we discuss not only why the film is a fantastic adaptation and remake of the original film, but also discuss the unique flair and flavor that Eggers brings to the project before we discuss its place within Eggers' larger filmography. I am so excited that we are back for another great year of talking about cinema. Now let's kick off that year with our review for Robert Eggers' Nosferatu. Okay, Nick, I am so excited to be back, our first episode of the new year. A new release I think we've both been anticipating alongside the world. I'm very excited to get into it. I'll turn it over to you first. What are your opening thoughts on Nosferatu?
I was indeed very much looking forward to this film, more so than I expected. Actually, I just found myself giddy with anticipation last couple of days before watching the movie. Like, oh my god, it's actually here. Mainly because it's been hyped up for so long by Robert Eggers. I still remember when he was distributing The Witch. Watched that back in like 2015, early 2016 or something like that. And he was talking about like, oh, I have this idea, Nosferatu, kind of like a more adult version for the modern era. Anya Taylor-Joy, God knows who else was going to be in the film, and then it always fell through. Made the Lighthouse, loved that one so much. Made the Northman, which I like. I think it gets a bad shake from some. I definitely think it's been butchered by studios. Was it like Universal or something? So it's a bit of unfair, but no, I still really like the Northman, and it's interesting that we have him and um, Ari Aster, both of whom made two beloved movies, and then the third one was not as great as the other two, and everyone kind of like not everyone, but just like a specific side of film Twitter and just the cinephile spheres kind of like turned against them. It's like, they suck now. They're not making the movies they used to make. And it's interesting then to get to have Eggers now release his fourth film, which is Nosferatu, something that's very clearly a passion project for him. And I have to say, I was low key blown away by it. I have reservations. But I want to say the first 90 minutes of Nosferatu by Eggers are one of the best films I've seen in the past year. I think the entire from the opening, which is this gripping nightmare, actually genuinely terrifying. I was jaw dropped watching it unfold on the screen, and then the entire trip of Hutter going to Transylvania, meeting Count Orlok. It was nightmarish. I mean, Eggers has kind of perfected that. I think The Lighthouse is still above and beyond just like special as a film, downright special in the way it approaches all of those things, editing wise, camera work. But in here, it was actually genuinely scary. And I know he was talking a lot about, making the vampires scary again after so many years. He succeeded. I do think that Count Orlok here is very creepy, very unsettling. I really love how he's mostly kept in the shadows. There's no like clear close up shot of his face pretty much at any time in the movie until the final act. Um, and just the tone of it, it's very. I'm a sucker for melodrama. I'm a sucker for movies that take themselves a little bit seriously. There's a lot here also to explore, just, the nature of this being a remake of an adaptation that was kind of its own way of reimagining something. So we'll definitely get into that later. Um, the only real problem I have, I'll just put it out right now, it's the pacing in the final act. The movie's like building, and then they literally stop and say, "Well, we'll give you, some time to slow down. Take your time, 3 days. It's no rush." Giving you a new countdown that just feels like you're stopping and starting again, which felt a bit sluggish in terms of writing. I know there's an extended cut. Apparently, we'll see if that actually comes out or not. Whatever was removed from this film, if it improves it or not, I doubt it. But yeah, overall, very impressed. Looks amazing. I really like the cast. I'm excited to talk about all of them, honestly. And yeah, what were your thoughts, Carson?
So I love Eggers. I mean, Eggers, like in that, like 2015, as you mentioned, to, like 2019, we have all these fun, exciting directors specifically working kind of in realms connected to horror. Eggers was always like my boy. I love The Witch. Love, love, love The Lighthouse. Those are two films that really got my attention. And I'm sad because like we didn't have the podcast then, so never got to like scream out them. We got The Northman, and I really don't love that film. I'm
Hmm?
like very like middle of the road on it. I think it's fine. I also remember
Yeah.
like being so concerned because I was like, "Oh, Eggers, you're moving to like big studios," and there was a bunch of conversations about that film and studio control and studios changing things and mandating things. And I was like, "Oh God, like please go back to something like that. It's very your vision." And Nosferatu is clearly his vision. I mean, you mentioned he has a passion for this film. He's talked about this film as being like a dream project for him. I want to talk about the film. I think at the end of this conversation, I'd love to talk about where it fits within Eggers' filmography because I have some other um, concerns, let's say, based around that. But as far as just in a
Mhm.
vacuum, this is probably, without changing or revolutionizing the actual narrative of Nosferatu, probably the strongest remake you could make of it. Taking that original film, and I think it's very clear for people who are Eggers fans who maybe saw him really go into some creative directions with some of his previous films, very clearly a remake of the original silent film. You mentioned also draws inspirations from other adaptations, which I really appreciated. And here and there, you can see little pieces. But what I love about this film is that it brings the darkness and the sinisterness back to vampires and back to the vampire lore. I actually saw this film twice, and then on a second time, you start to notice, like, no, actually, there was a lot of entertaining moments and there's a lot of comedy throughout. But especially on that first viewing, it is just unrelentlessly dark. And this vampire, while there is sex and there's sexuality all throughout this film, don't get me wrong, this is not necessarily a sexy vampire. This is not taking a
Oh God,
vampire
no.
and kind of undercutting it with those emotions. This is very like a dark force of evil that is upon these people like a plague. And you're seeing them just try to survive. And in that way, it is chilling. The visuals are fantastically dark. This has that Eggers style that really is just, it's hard to find many other filmmakers working today who have that same visual hand and directorial style. It really creeps up on you. And the amount of love and passion this film has for its vampire, for Nosferatu, Count Orlok, is just like stunning. It is, again, without transcending this narrative, probably the best and most serious and dark version of this you can have. In a way I appreciate. And I also think a lot of that, as you kind of alluded to, comes down to the performances. This is such a great cast that knows perfectly how to use every single one of its characters. In this absolute darkness, Willem Dafoe is like this light that you absolutely need, who is just so entertaining, who is consistently fantastic. Lily Rose Depp, I've been a big fan of her in other projects, but I think she nails it here. This is like a career making performance. There's a darkness and this emotion to her that just, it's unparalleled. Nicholas Holt is really strong. He's had a fantastic year. So yeah, I guess in my opening thoughts, like, I do think this film, again, some reservations. So the pacing definitely could use some areas of improvement. And I think overall, like, yes, would I like to see something maybe a little bit more creative from Eggers? And I think we can get to that later. Yes. But as a Nosferatu remake, yeah, this hits. I mean, this definitely hits, especially in the cinema. The first viewing of this I saw in the cinema, and
Oh,
thank God for that. Second time watched it from home. Uh, Definitely go out to the cinema. This is definitely one where it's like get just consumed by the darkness, and I think you'll have a great time with it because it is, again, super dark, super horror, but also very entertaining. There's a lot of entertaining stuff in here to make it very watchable.
it hooks you, man. Like like frame opening frame, literal step, like emerging from the darkness, come to me, and everything's like, oh shit. Like I'm currently back home in Italy. You know, it's not the most it's not the finest movie going public, you know. Um, and I went to the cinema, to my multiplex, and the screening was sold out. People, but they were packing screenings of Nosferatu, and they force, it's freaking, unfortunately, the Views cinema chain, which is more popular here in Europe. Um, they force an intermission halfway through the film. The audience audibly yelled. Like the movie cuts right as we get to the ship set piece, basically. And people are like, no, what? No. Like we have to wait 10 minutes watching this fucking ad for a milkshake in January, the ad for the milkshake. Just like bizarre choices. But that was a sign to me that people were in the movie. They were in it, and I was one of them. Like I was completely sold on it. Um, it's something that I was very not skeptical about, but again, like many that I've read who have negative reviews of the film, most of them boil down to it's boring, nothing happens, it doesn't really do anything new to the Dracula story. And to a couple of them that also like contacted me after I shared the review, I told them like it. I think it is important to make a very clear distinction between Dracula and Nosferatu, and that's something that Eggers himself talked about. I was listening to an interview with him for Evolution of Horror podcast just a couple hours ago, and he was talking about this. He was like, I didn't want to make a Dracula adaptation because I would feel like that I have to follow the pacing of the novel and the structure of it, and there's some parts of it that I just don't like. That there's just some baggage to it that doesn't really work nowadays. And he's completely right. And I think what makes the Nosferatu story interesting, I rewatched the original recently. I didn't have the time to rewatch the Herzog version, which I really love, but I will soon enough. I really want to soon enough to rewatch it.
But you've
Um,
seen it, right?
yeah.
Okay,
Like,
okay.
oh, I had this golden triple feature before this movie ever came out, was announced, whatever. I had this perfect triple feature, which was watch Nosferatu 1922, Nosferatu 1979, and then Shadow of the Vampire, the fiction movie about the making of Nosferatu, where Max Schreck is actually a vampire, also played by Willem Dafoe. Um, Fun triple feature, highly recommended even to this day. But what makes Nosferatu interesting to me, it's the German setting, which is already so different from setting it is in the UK. What makes it different is the plague element, which is very minimal in the Dracula novel by Stoker. In here, it's put at the forefront in every version. And to watch this, even watching the original after, or if we want to say it's even still during a global pandemic, kind of hits different, those visuals of I mean, just the visual of the coffins being dragged along the streets is very impactful in its own right. But also, just for me, one of the most haunting visuals in any of these movies remains the beach with crosses. That's weird, like cemetery along the beach. It's just like it's a very sorrowful film, very sorrowful experience, and it makes sense to make this rather than Dracula, because also Nosferatu is cinema. It is loosely adapted based on the novel, but it is its own creature. They change the names of the characters, they have them go through different arcs. The entire climax of it is set in Wismar in Germany instead of being going back to Transylvania. And there's a whole action. I mean, we talked about it with Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola film, a few months ago. So all those little changes make it way more interesting. And also the fact that at the forefront, we do have a female character as the protagonist, something that the original, 1922 doesn't really have. She's a very engaging actress. What's her name? Greta Schröder. She was very good for what the role was at the time, kind of thankless. And then Isabella Gianni made it completely her own in the Herzog version. She became the proper protagonist of it along with Bruno Ganz. And then, like you said, Lily Rose Depp in this film blew me away, blew me completely away. I was not expecting this level of physicality, of passion, of commitment to this role. Um, Also in the ways that it plays with the sexuality of it, because I completely agree with what you were saying. Like it is a very, I don't want to say erotically charged film, but kind of um, something that's very prevalent in the normal Dracula adaptations. You have the slick count, looks very cool, with the capes, Bela Lugosi. it's Gary Oldman with the mustache. But Nosferatu has always been a monster. He's always been just this vile creature. And I like how they essentially use this element of the monster to kind of explore sexual abuse, in a way, sexual trauma, and overcoming that trauma by re-empowering your own sexuality. It was something that I was not expecting. And that's when it kind of saddens me that a lot of the critiques, very shallow critiques, boil down to the movie doesn't do anything different from the others, when this entire angle is carried right from the opening scene up until the very last shot, which is haunting, absolutely haunting to watch. I don't know how you feel about all of these things. I don't want to go on for too long.
No, I mean, I totally am picking up what you're saying and fully am on the same page as you. I will say, because you did make a lot of points, so let's go through them. The plague setting, I absolutely
Oh,
agree, coming out of COVID, also echoes the effectiveness of the original Nosferatu, considering those German towns that they were filming in literally like went through plague stuff not that long before. The same people who were
Spanish flu?
experiencing the film were experiencing pandemics. So that reference is obviously there. There's also a lot I found added about and it's something we're going to have a lot of in the next 4 years, but a lot about politics, obviously. There's a great scene where they're like, why are you, I forget the exact quote, but basically yelling at Lily Rose Depp, like, why can't you just agree? Why do you have to go against the curve all the time? And she's like, well, because I'm right. And there's so much here I found about politics and about like conservative ideals being tested and people turning a blind eye to the reality around them just because they don't want to actually experience reality. That's all pretty much added and new. Um,
Hmm.
the final shot, and throughout all of this, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I've only seen, I think, a few episodes of it. But the TV show Hannibal, I think it's Hannibal, whatever is tied to that.
Yeah.
How the construct, because my old roommate was like obsessed with Hannibal, how they constructed the bodies and death scenes in that show was a very artistic eye. The final shot, especially in this film, really reminded me and tied to that. But I really want to focus on Lily Rose Depp because yes, she is phenomenal here. And I think what she does brilliantly that I love, and again, this is where like the passion and the love from Eggers and other people on the crew really shines because she really blends those two iconic performances together to make something that speaks to both of them. She brings the physicality, as you mentioned, that over the top physicality from the original, which I know some people really dislike that part of the original. I really dig it. I think that
Hmm.
actress does like a phenomenal job for portraying this larger than life shit in a silent film setting. I think she's fantastic. But Lily Rose Depp really brings that physicality while also bringing the emotional depth and kind of more poetic emotions of the
Yeah.
Herzog version and brings them together into this one really powerful character. I do think there are times where it feels like the film maybe strays away from her a little bit too much. I think, especially towards the beginning, especially on a rewatch. I agree with you about the pacing
Hmm.
and some of the structure here because there are a lot of different characters we're focusing on, and it does jump around quite a bit. And I don't know if it's always fully effective in how it splits its time. It does feel like we go away from Lily Rose Depp a little bit too much in that first act, considering we're going to be the whole film is based around her. Even in the beginning they tie it together to where really it is her story from beginning to end. I wish we got a little bit more just to tie her into that first half of the film. But like she is phenomenal, and so it was like Bill Skarsgård. I think was great. I really like the visuals they chose for that character, and also really respecting that
Yeah.
visual. Um, I think this accomplishes what Longlegs really wanted to do with his with Nicolas Cage's character, where like the visuals here throughout the film are protected and respected. Once you get there, I think it looks really strong. Yeah, I fully agree with you though. I think that anyone who says, and I do think that, like, in context, yes, this is a remake at its core and it does stay within those boundaries, but it does add certain emotional elements and political relevancies to where, like, yeah, this is Eggers doing a little bit more here for certain. I mean, there is a worth here, there's a value here that makes it go way beyond the original film if you watch that and talk about like how that connects to our world today. Eggers definitely does more.
Yeah, like especially because the original film Count Orlok is very much just a monster in a way that's very funny. Kind of rewatching it, it's just like, oh shit! Like, look at this guy. He's creepy as shit. And yeah, like all those moments. He's the monster who, oh, he looks at the pendant, sees the picture of Helen, and he's like, oh, nice neck. She looks pretty. I want her. I want to go to her. I'm already going in the same city for other reasons that aren't that important. And then just gets obsessed with her, bites her. Oh shit, sun coming out at the end. Herzog, being Werner Herzog, who really much loves misfits and very people at the margins of society, he finds the sadness of Nosferatu. He finds the sadness of this monster. I think Klaus Kinski brings a lot of vulnerability to the role, which is very different from the way Dracula is usually portrayed in other films, which is more menacing, more creepy. You could even say. Klaus Kinski is just sad. While in here, he is a predator. He is just like a animal, this beast. Um, I the entire idea of just he basically assaulted this girl years ago, um, in her own dreams, completely ruined her life, and she has only been able to move forward thanks to someone who truly loves her and sees her for who she is. I think what they've done with the character of Hatter is impressive. Not only they get Nicholas Holt, who is just like you want to hug him. You see, he's like lovable guy, super chill, super. It's like, oh man, you look nice. Better than Harry Styles, who was supposed to be the original choice. Maybe he would have been well directed. I don't know. I have my reservations with that choice. I'm glad we got Nicholas Holt. Um, but yeah, man, like uh, the way it becomes kind of this sick love triangle of sorts. I'm not really a love triangle because it's not like she's actually in love with this creature, but there is this element of also being drawn again to the darkness.
Yeah.
I'm always, I mean, we talked about it at length with our Blue Velvet episode last month, but just this idea of being drawn, of being torn from a more romantic ideal of love and a more primal ideal of love. Hatter is this very nice, clean cut man, a gentleman of proper times. And Nosferatu is, this fleshy being, rotten corpse falling apart, who is incredibly seductive in his own way. I think you're spot on with the long legs comparison because I was thinking about that since they kept everything hidden before showing it up, and long legs is literally just like a hard cut. Spoilers for long legs, I guess if you haven't seen it, just like a hard cut to Nicolas Cage with this botched shot, with this botched like plastic surgery thing going on with the makeup, full on in daylight, just like clear as day. You can get a nice screenshot of it, a nice photo of the screen in the cinema. And it's like, oh, okay, it's a choice. It's very bold, but it's just very matter of fact. You see it, you get it, you move on. And here, Eggers keeps playing up the mystery of him. And even at the end, whenever we see the Count's face, it's never for those long shots. It's never fully in light, and it works so well. It's horror of the purest form because if you don't see it, you just start building it up in your mind. And it took me a while to realize he had the mustache on, like this thick, classic Romanian mustache, like what they did with. I've seen men like that. There's a lot of Romanian immigrants in Italy. I've seen Nosferatus like that with less rotten flesh, thankfully. Um, it's very also respectful, dare I say, of just kind of respectful of Romanian culture, of the Carpathians, especially with having actual Romanian being spoken in the dialogue, by showing some of the people living there. It does kind of end in that classic, like, oh my god, these weird people are their bizarre rituals with the blonde naked virgin in the woods, all those things. But at the end of the day, you're still watching like a horror film set in like 1905 or 1905 or something like that. Um, yeah, but the sense of time and place is so key to Eggers, and he manages to be respectful, I would say, of these cultures, even though it does feel weird that it's all set in Germany and everyone is just, English
Yeah.
speakers. I think he could have maybe changed that
I,
location, but whatever. It's fine.
I don't know. I don't know if that just doesn't register for me. I mean, that's kind of though an inherently like with the Nosferatu slash Dracula even storyline, right? Like very core base in possibly some racist ideals and some racist
Um,
tendencies of the story. In the original Nosferatu, there's a ton of conversations that's been had about, is it against Jewish people? And then you find that the various voices on the production, like key voices in the production, were Jewish. So it's one of those things where it's always like, you can kind of read however it affects you personally and go there or there. I think
yeah.
Eggers is not terrible at this. Like watching this again, I do like that there is actual language brought into this. I think he is overall respectful, but like undoubtedly I think you can analyze this narrative and pull that from it as just kind of a core part of this narrative, which is worthy of discussion undoubtedly. I will say, I think, for going back to a long legs conversation quickly, the thing that strikes me about Cage's physicality, and this is I think like a key difference between these two films, is that when you see Cage, I think you laugh immediately. I think that is a face that ultimately, well, yes, in the advertisements and everything, they really hype it up as being horrifying. Ultimately, it's played for comedy, I would say. He makes some really dumb faces, I'm sure everyone's seen on Twitter. It's a very funny thing, and a lot of horror movies, even like I think Longlegs I would classify as being like a pretty dark, pretty serious horror film when you boil it
Mhm.
down. um Consistently, this genre in a modern sense is boiled down for comedy when you boil it down. When you peel back the curtain, you get the obviously like Scream films, which are pure comedy a lot of the points, but even like Longlegs, I think a lot of the time it kind of undercuts itself and like has a laugh at itself. Nosferatu really doesn't that much. There are certain lines here or there, when tied to tying her down to the bed. There's a lot of funny dialogue about that. There are like funny moments here or there, where it just sits on a piece of dialogue and you do have to laugh. But it's a film that ultimately respects itself and takes itself seriously to say, no, this is horrifying. And with every choice, including like his visual look and visual appearance, it's meant to continue drawing out that terror. Even when you see him, yes, it's not necessarily this demonic figure in this absolutely abstract, wild sense, but it
Mhm.
still is just chilling. I really, out of all the horror films I've seen this year, in recent years even, this is one where I sat at the theater and I genuinely was quite unnerved at times. Again, it just, there's a violence here, there's a abusiveness here. You mentioned the sexual abuse aspect of this, where he, and I love that they added really deep dive into that backstory. He found her at like her weakest moment and got this power and is still trying to abuse that power and abuse that place. Like, it is so tied obviously to like the horror ideals, and you have a lot of killing and you have the vampire stuff. It takes all of that and just plays it so seriously and so darkly. Even the frame is just so dark at times.
Oh,
it,
yeah.
it really sends like goosebumps down my spine. This is one of those where like it genuinely is unnerving, and I love that. I think like this is something that's been missing from the horror genre recently, especially on this level, and I'm so happy that people are showing up to this and really celebrating it, because horror can be this. It can be dark, and it can leave you feeling a little bit gross and feeling, oh, this is not like actually good. And that's great. So I really appreciate the film for that. I think that's something the film excels at.
Totally, totally. It's yeah. It's always fun to be like, oh my! It made me feel so bad, like the feeling of oppression, and just like feeling uneasy throughout. It was great. Loved it. But it's true. Like I was looking back at the list of even my favorite horror films from the past couple of years. None of them have hit in the same way that this one has. Especially again, like I cannot stress how much I really loved the horror in the first half. There's the entire stretch where Hutter reaches the castle, and it's shot like a nightmare, edited like a nightmare. He walks, there's no one around, the carriage arrives, carriage without a conductor, finally for once, because every time they try to play it off as this surprise, it's like, oh my god, it's Dracula. It's like, now you get it. Like, you just see him, especially in the
Look,
Murnau
I did
version. It's
kind
like
of want
this,
him in a hat. I did want him in that little hat, like peeking over in the original. Didn't say I
like
kind of wanted
giant
that.
scarf as well,
Yep.
and all of that. Um, but then, yeah, just entering the castle. Um, One thing that I always kind of find, I just accept it because I love the horror genre. I love these stories. I'm a big fan of Dracula the novel as well. It was one of the first horror novels I read like 13 years ago at this point. Jesus. Um, but there are parts where you actually go like, that doesn't really, Like, why would you do that? you know, even rewatching the original Nosferatu, there's some moments where you go, why would you do that? Like, why did you have to go outside from the river? Why could you just like find an alternative route in the castle? Why couldn't you, like, you find this guy in the coffin and you realize, oh, he might be a vampire that I've read about in a book? Why don't you just kill him? And here it's all it's you get it. You get why he makes those choices. He actually tries to make the right choices. Like, Nicholas Holt is so scared. He has like this petrified look of, I'm just doing what's being told to me because I cannot think straight. And every instruction that I get, I just accept it. And it's constantly being moved around from place to place. But one moment that really hit me that I was not expecting, because I barely saw anyone mention it, which I appreciate actually. The the biting, where it's not biting the neck, but it's biting the chest, which feels so wrong to everything that we have seen in vampire cinema or read in vampire literature. The neck is just this, it's the beautiful, sumptuous, erotic. It's just the kissing, the caresses. People do it, erogenous zone. But just going for the chest, it's so much more primal, going close to the heart, directly bleeding from there. I don't know how you felt about that image of it, but even where it leads to, especially like in the climax as well, where you have a female body, but even just Hatter's body, all of the bites around his chest. It's so like, I want to say messed up. I don't want to say it because it's just cheap, but kind of it's twisted in a way that I think like he found a different way of doing this,
Yeah.
where it feels more animalistic, while
Mhm.
also kind of heightening the sexual element of it. And that's something, small parentheses, I'm sorry, because it's kind of tied to this. I did notice that some people were very, I don't know if uncomfortable, but they were very much surprised by the overt sexuality of the film. Whenever there was a bit of nudity or like actual sex happening, vampire dong on full display and those things, they were chuckling a bit. I think more out of like, oh, what the like, we're actually going there, like something that's usually, like you get the critic saying like, yeah, the themes, it's actually playing into the sexuality of the character. In here it's like, no, it's not subtext, this is text, like putting it at the forefront.
I don't know. Maybe it's just because like who we are. But I feel like you cannot make a vampire film without sex. I feel like sex is so like for decades and decades and decades of content tied to sex and sexuality that like I think it's just like a staple of the monster, to be honest. What I love though, and you mentioned the chest and you mentioned how much sex there is in this film, I would say this probably ups the overt sex and the physicalness of the sex. But I think it really hits and lowers the sensuality of it, which I like.
Mhm.
Again, I think with vampires, and we've seen this fascinatingly over the last few decades, with obviously the rise of like Twilight and such. The vampire genre has always been tied to sex, but it's not necessarily been tied to where you like desire the vampire or you sexualize the vampire, romanticize the vampire. It is something that we've seen more and more romanticizing of the vampire, where you get this sensuality. And as friend of the podcast, Hillary White has mentioned a ton. Jack Luke Sharp has mentioned a ton. I think we've mentioned a ton. That has not always led to maybe the most healthy of relationships being displayed, the most healthy of concepts being displayed. And while yes, film is fantasy, I don't really care. Go enjoy your, I don't know, vampire romances. I love Twilight. I like that Eggers, I think, does everything in his power to keep the sex and remove the romanticizing of it. It's not a sensual, just gentle bite on the neck. It is an animalistic, as you mentioned, attack. This passion, this desire from Nosferatu to be with this woman. It's not seen as being like, oh, he loves me and he's obsessed with me, like it was in Twilight. Like
The
it's really,
reincarnation.
yeah, it's dark, it's abusive, it's horrifying. He takes all that and he just removes that bit of like desire from it in a way that I just find very interesting and very effective. And again, I think that like, and not to shit on vampire media, because again, I like Twilight. I think we like plenty of modern vampire interpretations. Humans vampire seeking consenting suicidal person. Go check it out. Great. I think
Eh,
this film works to like restore the vampire to be that dark evil figure that still has sex, still has all these little bits that we associate with him, but it restores the vampire in a way that like I kind of am obsessed with. I've also over the last like few years through all of our talks really fallen like so deeply in love with Universal monsters and the Universal monster narratives that like it does like hit me to where I'm like, yes, I love that there's this amazing piece of vampire cinema that just like brings him back to his full evil self in a way that's really difficult to do, that we don't often see. I think that is one of the strongest points here. And I think that's one thing with like Eggers. And again, we'll talk about his like career path in a little bit. I think that proves Eggers has the ability to do something with an original text like as an adaptation that really impresses me and makes me excited. Like all of a sudden, if Eggers was to announce I'm remaking Frankenstein, oh, I cannot wait to see this monster who we've grown to have a love and empathy for. Like all that still be there, but put in this dark, restoring his monstrous self. Like, I don't know. There's something really inspiring about that. And I just love, and I just like, again, one thing we've talked about with Clapper for so long, so not sound like I'm beating a broken horse, but like, when you have passion for something, it so shows on screen. And it's so clear that Nosferatu and Eggers has spent so much time thinking about the film and thinking about these characters and thinking about how he views them and just has this interesting relationship with them that he puts into this in a way that like you could claim Del Toro does with Shape of Water. Go check out our review, maybe some mixed opinions on Clapper about that film. But like, I think when you have a passion for it and then you tackle it, you kind of get magic. And I think that Eggers is really great at that here.
Yeah, and everyone that worked on this film, just the production design in here, bringing to life these city streets, which I think were shot primarily in Czech Republic. The costumes, which do harken back actually to the silent film. Rewatching it, I was like, oh wait, oh check it out. There's some designs coming back here, especially the funeral dress of Helen. It's directly taken from the silent film, and all those little moments, the look of Knock. We haven't talked about Knock, kind of like the familiar of Nosferatu. That entire character. It's fun how those characters were originally, you had Renfield, you had Van Helsing, and then were rewritten as new characters that are kind of, I want to be honest, pointless in the original film. They don't really do much. I like how they've made Knock a proper character. I like how they've made I forget the name, the doctor, uh, Professor Albin von Franz, that Willem Dafoe plays. Kind of like he's more along the lines of like Anthony Hopkins in the Coppola version, a bit kooky, a bit weird, but also, like you said, like light. Not only is he a shining light of hope, also is a shining light of humor. You need him. I think that's the moment where the movie kind of like switches a bit. It's like, okay, we can take a breather for a second. We're in good hands. Willem Dafoe is here. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna get some jokes. He's more of a modern thinking man. But I also like that they don't make him, and that's again one thing that I love about Nosferatu as a story compared to Dracula, is that they don't make the man the true heroes, the true protagonists in here. And it comes close to being more of that Van Helsing, I know everything, I'm gonna find a solution and whatever. It's like, I don't know anything actually. Like, this is the first time I'm encountering this creature for real. I've read about him. I've heard things, come in close contact, but I don't actually know what to do, how to deal with him in this situation. And it empowers once again the female character, which also hats off to Emma Corrin, who I think is fabulous in this film. They were the best part of freaking Deadpool and Wolverine, in my opinion. Um, just like knocking it out of the park with potentially thankless roles and making them way more impactful. There's some moments with the character where, I don't know, like, no, are we doing spoilers? We're not doing spoilers.
I'm sure we can go into spoilers. Yeah, let's go into spoilers.
Okay, I always bawled for a director to actively show children being killed in a film, especially when they're being eaten by a fucking vampire. And that scream that she cries was like, wow. Like, holy shit. It was so impactful, like that entire sequence. Even moments that are straight up like throwaway, like studio executives would be like, we don't need this moment, cut it out. But there's an entire shot of her just like walking in a corridor and the camera like slowly dolling away, then panning around the room, panning back, and then there's just like literal step behind her out of nowhere, which is not a jump scare per se, but it was so well done. It's like, mm, direction, vision, setting the atmosphere, keeping it, holding it, all those little moments. Which then, what I like about the quieter parts is that it reaches those climactic explosions of tension that are so beautiful. I think the entire climax, from the moment that, thank God, Aaron Taylor Johnson dies, up until the final shot, I think that's just like mwah, cherry on top. Like the build up of it, the soundtrack, same guy who made um, the Northman, if I'm not mistaken, Robin Carolan. I mean, it's all, I tried listening to it. It's not a score you can listen to, but in context of the film, it's just so tense. It's nail biting. I don't know, like it does feel. I was listening. It was nice to listen to Eggers say, "I'm thankful that the movie never came to fruition up until now, because not only have I grown as a filmmaker, but I'm also working with the right people to make this project great." And you can tell it was meant to be like this. It would be interesting to know what a 2019 Eggers Nosferatu would have been like instead of The Lighthouse. Who knows what the casting would have been? Definitely Anya Taylor Joy for sure. But other than that, like who could have gotten back then? Like I don't know. But I'm glad we have the movie as it is now, and I'm very happy that it's being watched, that people are going to the cinema. I've read that in the States it's doing gangbusters. I saw messages from the Berlin art house chain that's saying, absolutely, for Queer and Nosferatu, book tickets days in advance because they're all going sold out, which is crazy. Like people are going to the cinema for the very creepy, disturbing, gory vampire film. That was something that felt just weird to me. I've been to the cinema many times here in Italy to watch horror films. They're never this full. Never. Not even Scream had this many people there. For something that feels so taboo, so unlike anything that's on paper commercial. We got trailers for Bagman, uh, for another. It's like a Lionsgate film. We got trailers for another movie that was like, what is this shit? Then we got the trailer for Wolfman. I was like, okay, okay, okay. This is hold on. This is real cinema. But
Let him
everything
cook.
else
Let
felt
him
like
cook.
let him cook, let him cook. But everything else was trash, man. It was like, what are we doing here? Like again with these fucking Slenderman knockoffs, and then you watch Nosferatu and you see people actually like it, which again, like I know it's been, some would say it's been divisive. I think it's divisive among like the cinephile fans, some who are more indebted to the originals, those who don't like Eggers. It's fine, I get it. But for general audiences, warms my heart, gives me hope every time I go to the cinema and people like that are there.
Well, that's what blew me away from this, is that like general audiences are not just showing up, which is great. Cause like also if you remember the Northman, they didn't really show up for that film. Like Eggers is not necessarily like such a proven commodity within the general public to where people will always go. So like that was warming my heart. But then also like they liked it. They were celebrating this film. How many horror movies, specifically, let's focus on horror movies, come out that have a really great marketing campaign and you go and people just hate them, even if they're really good. I think like It Comes at Night was really big, obviously, like kind of iconic in that way.
Mm,
I think even like Long Legs, I know a lot of people really disliked. I know a lot of people didn't like Barbarian, though I think overall people did like Barbarian more than they didn't like it. Like for horror, and I would not predict that seeing the film, even though I really like the film. I would have been like, oh, this is just not gonna, because like you also kind of have to know the Nosferatu story to really put it all together. You really have to like it's not a film that I would necessarily say is super warming or like welcoming to people who just have no idea what to expect and are probably expecting a more traditional horror movie. But people love this film, which is like great. And I think again, in this conversation of new releases in general, but specifically horror, when you make stuff of quality, of passion, people turn out and they really like it. Who knew? It's shocking how that gets told time and time again. And it's sad seeing horror movies that just like look like garbage. It's always depressing going to the movie theater this time of year though, because you just get all the January and February releases, and it's like, oh, not a lot going on here. Got it for the next couple months. Um,
Jesus, yeah.
but yeah, I could not appreciate more the reception to this, because also, like, as we mentioned again, Northman didn't do great box office wise, didn't do great with general audiences. The Lighthouse was super popular within certain circles, but I don't think general audiences necessarily love that. The Witch was, I know, disliked by a lot of general audiences. I think critics really appreciated that one, but like Eggers again is just not someone where, like, I think Oz Perkins now has a name to where people will go out and see the new Oz Perkins film. I think Eggers is also one of those people, but it's nice seeing um, people go, especially during Christmas in a very busy time at the theater where there are tons of
Yeah.
options. People are, stopping, going from seeing Sonic 3, and they're seeing Nosferatu, and I appreciate it. So
And then they can go to
I'll celebrate that.
Mufasa, the other
Well,
screening.
we'll get there in our rapid reviews, right?
No, I, I, it was something that I was hoping for a couple of years ago because I started to see the trend shifting a bit more. But when The Witch came out, it was, I want to say, it was 1 year after The Babadook, and that's when we started to get like, oh, people, those movies are different from the more violent horrors that we've been getting. Those are going for more insidious, like slower, getting under your skin. There's themes and thematics that you can attach yourself to, and kind of like, oh wait, this movie is about grief. It's about trauma, being a mother, growing up as a woman, and all those things. And then we started to get more movies that were being sold as horror films, but were instead more just like dark dramas, movies that were putting their thematic relevance a bit too much in the forefront for their own good, instead of trying to be just an engaging film first and foremost. And I think that around like after the pandemic, during the pandemic, I don't know, but definitely something shifted where people want more escapism. People want to go to the movies to have the experience. And I think selling someone on the theme is going to get harder. I myself am getting a bit tired of it. I don't know. Like sometimes I read just plot synopsis of upcoming horror films and thrillers, and it's like someone who's processing trauma, someone who lost a loved one, someone is like, oh my god, like it's important. I don't want to deny that, and everyone has their story to tell, but so more often than not, they just feel like they're just following the trend. And instead, now I think Barbarian, the Scream movies, Long Legs, uh, Nosferatu, like all those movies, they are pure genre films first and foremost. People are going out to, people want to have fun, they want to have that weird experience, and they are also, I think, the best ones are harkening back to olden times. Longlegs kind of did it with the cinematography and the style of it, the vibe, but also Nosferatu. Like, this doesn't feel like something that would naturally come out in 2024. That's that you get the fucking bag man with the guy with the smiley face putting kids in bags. That's what you get nowadays. So it feels, I think, fresh even for audiences. And I remember going to screenings for the past few months, and you would get X, Y, and Z movies, whatever, and then the trailer for Nosferatu would come on. Every time people would shut up. People shut up, watch the trailer religiously. Nosferatu with the giant letters, the strings playing, trailers over, and then people start talking again until the movie starts. It was just like, it was so well marketed in a way that doesn't rely on jokes, on memes, on viral campaigns, on weird gimmicks. Did they have like a coffin popcorn bucket or something like that in the States? Maybe I don't remember.
Both a popcorn bucket, and for I think $40,000, you could buy the real coffin. You could buy a real one. It's a bed.
Damn.
Just
Yeah, we
saying.
should chip in.
If the Patreon wants to go crazy this month, I'm just saying. But
We can pass it around from, we can just like ship it 6 months here, 6 months there, among everyone in Clapper. Yeah, no, I'm happy people are liking it. It's showing on IMAX screens, Nosferatu. Like, what's happening?
yeah.
So good.
I will throw out there, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I feel like nobody's talking about this. As a big Eggers stan, and I really like the film, so it's going to sound confusing, because like obviously I like the movie a lot. I do miss when he would do more original work. Like, I think The Witch and The Lighthouse are two like breakout, standout, super creative, super unique, like transcendent experiences. And I think this is a fantastic remake. And I think The Northman like has issues, or Northman also was tied to more set stories. Like, I do think Eggers has the capability as a writer to produce really, really unique, individualized, like never before seen works before. And I do kind of hope he starts going back to that, because while this was great, I would say this is still a step down for me compared to The Witch and The Lighthouse. And I just like, when looking at his career, I do think this is good, but I really think you could do a little bit more if you keep going back to originals. I just hope, as, and obviously this is a passion project, good for him, make whatever you want. Um, I would like to see a little bit more of that. I don't know your thoughts on it.
I feel the same way actually, because I was thinking about just the ranking of Eggers. I need to rewatch this film. I really want to next week, thankfully, or like a little over a week. I'll be able to watch it again. Um, yeah, it's interesting because I think hearing him talk, I really like listening to interviews with directors, and I really like Eggers as a personality, not as a person, but as a personality. I think he's very knowledgeable. He's very passionate, especially about, and that's what he always talks about in every interview. He's very passionate about being true to the source, and I think that's what you are completely spot on. Is that if he's writing his original screenplay for Two Lighthouse Keepers, he's going to study the shit out of how those things worked, how those people spoke. But at the end of the day, he's making up the story together with his brother. But still, it's his creation. If he makes Nosferatu, when he makes Hamlet, but Northic, like actually said at the time, it would have been said, blah blah blah, you can feel that he's kind of like chaining himself to the narrative because he loves it so much. And there's a couple of parts in here. It was especially noticeable rewatching the original film right before the Eggers version. Is that like he's just hitting those beats, he's hitting some of those shots, which looks cool, but again, could have maybe done something a bit more different. So I feel that negative reviews that cite this as a big problem for them. It wasn't a problem for me per se, but I totally get what you mean. Like I do hope that the next projects from him are just like Gonzo, God knows what. I know Willem Dafoe is already in talks for two of them. He said yes, let's do them for whatever you want for me next, man. I'll be there. Bless them. A great combo of actor director.
It's wild because he puts Willem Dafoe through like hell. If you read like the lighthouse background, like just basically made him go live on
Jeez.
this like cold rock for a month, and Willem Dafoe's still like, put me in, coach, I'll do it again. Like, love that partnership. But like, to be clear again with overall thoughts, I think this is great. I think especially if you love Nosferatu and you really want to see like, what does this film look like in a modern era of filmmaking, keeping respect to the original while also adding a little bit more. There is more. I don't want to, again, make it very explicit that there is stuff added that makes this a little bit more worthwhile and a little bit more deep and relevant. Um, Again, I think this is probably the best it could be. Unless you want to blow up this narrative and you want to do something different, this is as good of a remake as you can possibly get. And I'm happy that we got it because, again, I think it proves a lot for Eggers. I think it is obviously what he wants, and especially in the performances. I think this is one that like chart Lily Rose Depp's hopefully like upward momentum from here, because her work and the entire cast is just fantastic. What are your final thoughts on Nosferatu, Nick?
Loved it. I think rewatching it will solidify it for me even more how much I actually liked it. Getting to experience it again with the like loudspeakers, giant like screen, getting completely covered in darkness and figures moving through it. I love that it is just a grand spectacle with a very intimate feel. It's something that's so hard to achieve, and there's all those moments where it felt big, when you get like Hutter and the people just got like running around with the torches, we have to burn down the coffin, etc. I was like, this feels epic, but it's still very personal, very intimate. It's not like the Coppola version that gets super bombastic, which I also love. I love the more heightened approach that Coppola went for, and more romantic and sweeping, with the big creature and the yelling and the swords and the action. But in here, I think he gets to the core of the characters. he manages to make them feel like real interesting characters. He added extra depth to pretty much all of them, honestly. And that alone makes it, like you said, the best possible version. I cannot picture a better version. And I think that's something that people have to kind of like deal with. Like, you're going to watch Nosferatu 2024. What do you expect? Like, what do you want? Do you want a completely different narrative? Like, I think this is indeed the best you can get. Yeah. Props to Eggers. He
Oh, for
did it
sure.
again. Finally. Finally.
Yes. I love Eggers, so thrilled for whatever he does next. Continue adding to a great filmography. If you want to see if you want to see Nosferatu, not the Northman, that's his old one. If you want to see Nosferatu, you can currently find it wide release in theaters across the globe. It's finally out over in Europe, so I'm happy you could join me for this episode, Nick. Um, let's go to our question of the week, which is going to be asking, what is your favorite talking film that is a remake of a silent film? So it was silent, now is talking. Nick, I'll turn it over to you first. What is your answer?
It's a bit of a tie because it's not that easy. But just because we're talking about Nosferatu, to be honest, like the Herzog version, again, I wish I was able to rewatch it. I would have gone for that like 100% because I'm a Herzog boy. I've seen all of his films, love him. I have like 5 books from him. Great inspiration. And that movie is just, I remember watching it, it was poetry. Just poetry. I wouldn't even consider his film a horror film. I don't think he cares about making a horror film, to be honest. Herzog is just doing his thing, and there's a lot of compassion. There's a lot of humanity in it, which kind of gets lost with all of the like the Popol Vuh soundtracks with the shots of nature and the elves and all of that. Um, but going through a list of all those movies, there is actually one that I watched last year that completely blew me away, which again, it is a remake, even though it's based on a novel. But the 1931 version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, adaptation of Robert Louis Stevenson, starring Frederick March. It's not a Universal, it's a Paramount film that feels straight up like Paramount trying to capitalize on Dracula and then Frankenstein, like all those films that were starting to come out from Universal, Hunchback of Notre Dame. But it's so, not only is the central performance amazing, just the makeup of it as well. I think it was the first like best makeup winner or something like that. Um, but it manages to find the horror of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, like the split personality, the evil that's inside every man, the possibility and capability of doing harm to others. I think it manages to explore those things in a way that's also very playful, but also just dark. Like a 1931 film that acknowledges, violence against women, which should be a given, but you see it more often than not portrayed in a nonchalant way in movies of the time. In here, it is straight up like you're watching a woman being gaslighted and being like tortured mentally by this man who's keeping her locked up in this metaphorically and also literally in a terrible relationship in a terrible place. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1941 and Nosferatu the Vampire from 1979. My tie. What's yours, Carson?
So obviously a preference that, like, I'm sure there's others that we didn't look at when doing this research. I'm sure there's a ton of really great ones out there that I really even enjoy that just didn't come up. For me, off the list I was looking at, 1959's Good Morning by Ozu would be my selection.
I
However,
knew it.
I feel dirty predicting this because people claim, including Wikipedia, this is the remake of his 1932 film I Was Born But like, that is such bullshit. As someone who's seen both these films, it is not a remake. Literally the only connection is that there's kids in both. It is not a remake.
Two
It is not
kids.
similar. Completely like a wild claim to like it's just a remake. No, it's not. So while that is my choice, I'm also going to also select Nosferatu the Vampire by Herzog. Not Steal Your Thunder. You're definitely more of a Herzog stan than I am, but like, what a
Ah,
great retelling of Nosferatu. And kind of how I was saying, like, this does not romanticize the vampire. In that film, there's a lot more sensuality. There's a lot more emotion in that sense and what it evokes. It's a really brilliant adaptation. So if you were a big fan of Eggers' film, I would recommend you definitely check out Herzog's film also. Just a different take on it, which I appreciate.
I just want to say, side note, because we're talking about the Nosferatu Herzog, starring Isabella Gianni, who also starred in Possession. I think it's a good time to kind of retire that performance, like put it in a glass shelf and not touch it, because I'm glad that we both really liked Nosferatu. We also both really liked The First Omen from last year. There's other female performances that can be taken as inspiration for a film. I think everyone trying to do the Isabella Gianni from Possession is starting to get a bit much. Our boy Eggers talked about it. He was like, "Oh yeah, it was an inspiration." It also really was. I was like, "Yeah, Isabella Gianni Possession." It's like, we get it. It's become kind of like the perform. Before it was Gina Rowlands in oh my god, why am I blanking? A Woman Under the Influence. Now you have Isabella Gianni in Possession. I think we can find other performances to take inspiration from instead of going back to the same movie, because everyone's starting to do I'm a bit crazy. I start screaming wildly and like agitating my body, which is impressive, but we can do something different as well.
Sure.
Just
Absolutely.
a side note.
You can let us know your favorite sound films that were inspired by silent films on Twitter or at our email. But now let's get to our rapid reviews. Anything we've seen recently that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I have quite a list, so I'm going to go quickly through the highlights. Let's start with the new releases. Why don't we? Last episode, Nick, we were here for reviewing something. We talked about previewing Mufasa the Lion King, finally
Oh, yeah.
released. Look, Barry Jenkins tries. He definitely is like, there's a story here that's interesting, and it's just very clear that he cannot fully overcome Disney's hope to make this family friendly, hope to make this family accessible. The comedy is bad. The visuals are like, they range from being decent to like the worst visuals you've ever seen in a movie in your
Oh,
life, like horrible animation, especially at the beginning. The very start is like you can tell it was added afterwards, because it literally is like the worst rendering, and you're sitting there like, oh god, this looks disgusting, and then it gets a little bit better. Again, Jenkins tries it, just he can't overcome it. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I know everyone loves it. My audience cheered. My audience literally stood up and cheered for parts of it.
oh wow.
Not for me.
Oh
Not
wow.
can't say it was fully for me. I think some of the jokes worked, but definitely I don't know. Just seeing two
You're not
Jim
a
Carreys
Shadow
on my,
Stan.
I don't know who that is really. I don't know. The end credit scene. This is the first one where I watched it and I was like, I don't know who these people are. I don't know. I'm so sorry. Seeing
Is there Big the
two,
Cat? Who
it's
appears?
possible. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know
Little
their
Bat.
names. I
Oh my god!
wish.
It's starting to turn into
Um
furries porn.
Well, hold on, but I I don't know. Just seeing two Jim Carreys on my screen like twerking, it didn't
Oh
didn't it
wow!
didn't hit me. But maybe for you, and I'm so happy for all the Sonic stances working, because I don't know, it was fine. Craven the Hunter was depressing. I don't like y'all. Look, the Sony Spider-Man universe that does not contain Spider-Man. I was so like
Oh
able to
no!
be like, it's my thing before this year. I liked Morbius. I like Venom too. I like Venom. I was like, oh my god, it's fun. And then it was Madam Web, which was like the worst thing ever made. And I was like, oh my god, ow, stabbed in the gut. And then Venom 3 was horrendous. And I was like, oh, stabbed in the gut again. And then Craven just was like the final blow, like a shot through my head, where I was like, it wasn't even hot. It was not even hot. Who
Damn.
cares? At least there were some good older films I watched. I finally watched Eyes Wide Shut, which is obviously like what a breath of fresh air in this conversation. Um, wildly good film. Super intense. I would love to watch this again. But I mean, definitely solid. I watched Minority Report for the first time. I was doing like a Tom Cruise Christmas. You'll notice the theme here.
Yeah.
Minority Report was fantastic. Magnolia, excuse me, was what a fascinating screenplay. I don't know if it needs to be 3 hours long, I'll be really honest, but like the screenplay and how it's put together was just like fascinating to me. I mean, really emotionally worthwhile. Also, it wasn't just a gimmick, but it really went places. Interview with a Vampire. Oh my god, guys, I cried. Blew me
Yeah.
away, blew me any of my expectations away. Talking about great vampire films, please go check this out. Especially if you really love the queer aspect of vampire lore. Absolutely love this. Death by Adaptation. One day we should do this, Anatomy of an Adaptation, because it's
That and the
fantastic.
show. They
Yes,
are on the lineup.
I need to watch the show. And then I've been watching this random stuff for January. I finally watched the first Cloverfield, which is super worthwhile as far as found footage goes. What a shame that like the genre since this has been like woof, it's been bad. But Cloverfield, a little gem there. Like not anything incredible, but definitely like tense again, kind of like the most basic great found footage film you can have. But it works for me. I watched Songs My Brother Taught Me, Chloe Zhao's first feature. Beautiful. What a beautiful little slice of life. It reminds me of like a Steinbeck novel put to film, looking at life on this reservation with young people and really analyzing the different escapes people take, whether that be alcohol, whether that be dreams, whether that be connections, whether that be, oh, I'm moving out of here, I just need to make this money. Whatever it is, it's just everyone has their little escapes from their lives. And I just found this to be gorgeous. I was on a plane and I randomly decided to watch Oz the Great and Powerful. Um, it's not as bad as people say. People were like giving this 1 star, and I think that's a bit unfair. There are some creative
Oof.
ideas here. Some of the visual effects are terrible. I do think the actual conflict gets really boring by the end, but absolutely 5 stars for the monkey. Love the monkey in this. Memories of Murder, excuse me, Bong Joon Ho. Great true crime feature. Um, Super tense, super fun at the same time, super entertaining. Um, does something really, and it's interesting because I watched Zodiac last year, so putting these in conversation. When you have a case that is unsolved and you can't give a clean like resolution, always really interesting seeing how films tackle that in an emotional way, and I think they do a great job in this film. And then finally, I did what I hate to do, which is go back and watch like 90s Tim Burton, because it just makes you depressed. It makes you so sad to see that like we're celebrating Beetlejuice when this guy once put out Ed Wood. Holy shit, dude. Ed Wood is
Oh,
so good.
yes.
Look at a trash director who just has a passion for filmmaking, even if he's not really good at it, really anchored by his relationship with Bella Lugosi, who is both absolutely the portrayal of him in this is like heartbreaking and so hilarious. Him just in the water being like, fuck Karloff. I was like, oh my God, this is like my shit. But this movie, like, truly, just with Burton, you always, even though you know he was great, you forget that he was like, no, he's making like amazing features. This, Sleepy Hollow, Big Fish, like, damn, he was hitting it out of the
Damn,
park in this
yeah.
era. And Ed Wood is like, possibly one of my favorites of his. I still think probably Big Fish is above it, but like I adored Ed Wood. I would love to see more conversation on this. And it inspired me to go watch. I want to watch his real life works now, even though I'm sure they're bad. I'm sure Plan from Outer Space 9 or whatever is bad. I am sure Glenn or Glenda is
Glenn
bad,
or Glenda.
but I need to go see it. And I just like, I don't know, his relationship with Bela Lugosi just like, I don't know, it warms my heart. It really does. So those are my films I've seen. Nick, what have you seen this past couple
Wow,
weeks?
that's a great selection. Actually, that's a nice. I mean, the older films are a great selection. The newer ones, sadly. No, I did actually go on a bit of a. I'm gonna do just like highlights as well because I've seen way too many things during the Christmas break. In terms of like newer releases, I did pretty much end up watching mostly new releases. Heretic, I really liked with Hugh Grant. I was shocked by how much I liked it. Also incredibly tense. It's one of those movies that sadly it's not that it loses steam, but you kind of like get what it's going for towards the last act, and it doesn't have enough tension left in itself to sustain, final push. I think that's something that Nosferatu actually did very well, is getting to the climax and still being very thrilling, very tense. Heretic a bit less so, but yeah, no, I still really, really enjoyed it. Also, really enjoyed Flow, the animated film from Latvia. Um, just so it's a clear example of, oh, this is a movie for kids, totally not a movie for kids. I think this is like digital poetry. Basically, it's this super cute animals on a trying to survive an apocalypse, basically a water wave that's going to destroy everything, and it's so meditative and reflexive without an ounce of dialogue. It was just so refreshing, and I love the style of it. Just super simple, bare bones. Um, yeah, it makes you watch something like Mufasa, and it's like we could be doing something so much better than this. Like, just invent more, invent more. Sadly, someone who tried to invent more and failed completely was my boy Chris Pine with Pool Man. I was hoping to like it. I like sleuth stories, the investigations. Oh, I'm a bit dumb and stupid, but I'm gonna try to crack a case. This movie was annoying. It was just straight up annoying to watch. Gave me a headache. It's constantly referencing Chinatown in a way that's not clever at all. You can tell he cared. You can tell he had love for this movie, which makes me happy because he's proud of his work, and he should be. Sadly, it's not a good movie. It's just like bad. When someone's like, "Oh, it's a bad movie," it's like, "This is it." I struggle to. I love those movies, but another movie that was really bad. I still don't know why I watched it on Christmas Eve. Dirty Angels, which is the new Martin Campbell film, director of Casino Royale, The Mask of Zorro, starring Eva Green, Barina Bakalova, and other actresses. Um, just American jingoistic trash of like, yay, troops are leaving Afghanistan in 2021, but we need to save daughters of counselors, just people, and let's get women to do it. This group of female soldiers. It was just trash. Why did I watch it? I don't know. One film I'm glad I watched, The Dead Don't Hurt. Dead Don't Hurt, because I want to say The Dead Don't Die every time, but that's another film. Um, Viggo Mortensen Western. I've been playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption on my holidays, and I was craving some Western goodness. And this film delivered to a point. It's a bit too long. It uses non-linear structure that I think he just shot himself in the foot with it. It's basically this love story about Viggo Mortensen and Vicky Krieps, but it's all, I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but whatever. I think it's the main problem with the film is that it opens with, oh my god, she has died from being just sick. And the movie is him and his son kind of like bonding together and trying to bury this woman, and it keeps intercutting it with when he first met her. So these two narratives are going on parallel lines, which is interesting. But then he also injects some kind of like, Deadwood style. Like there's political plotting, there's other side characters that are so boring. So boring. Good actors, but boring as shit. If this were a clean 90 Carson, this would be one of the best of the year. Vicky Krieps and Viggo Mortensen together, love them. Um, Big surprise, I don't think you've seen this one, but I think you would actually really like it. Ren Fair, the miniseries, like an HBO free episode by Lance Oppenheim. Um, Really good look at how a Renaissance fair, like behind the scenes of the making of a Renaissance fair, and there's this very crazy, uh, uh, like the king of the fair, the CEO, the founder of it, is going to retire, and there's people that want to take his place, and so it's kind of like political plotting behind the scenes, backstabbings and whatnot, but all about a Renaissance fair, which is very low key stakes, but it becomes this nice encapsulation of like America nowadays, which was very fun and just gorgeously shot. Like I don't know how they made this. I genuinely don't know how they shot this because it looks way better than most feature films I've seen the last year. Impressive. And super quickly, Snack Shack, watch it today. Ah, ah, just sure, sure. Coming of age, comedy. Oh my god, there's raunchiness. Oh no, it gets sad at the end. Completely predictable. I did like the cast though. Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Must Foul. Delightful, delightful. A bit too long. There's this entire like cop characters that they could have done without, honestly. But other than that, it's just Wallace and Gromit doing their thing. And lastly, probably my favorite film that I watched during the holiday break, first time watch. I finished the entirety of Sean Baker's filmography, and Starlet from 2012. I really liked. I will also say like Takeout and Prince of Broadway deserve a watch. Both very good, but Starlet is like, mm, yes, yes, like this very young porn performer who becomes friends with this elderly woman, like 85-year-old grandma. And I have a soft spot for unconventional friendships like that. And this one was so full of heart without having like dumb whimsy put in. It felt very real, very raw, which is what I like about Sean Baker. Side note, I rewatched Anora for the third time, and that's when I was like, I just really like this movie. It ended up being like among the top of my year. I never would have guessed from the first screening, but it's just stuck with me. So yeah, Sean Baker, thumbs up. Watch all of his films, all worth it.
Sure. I'm excited to rewatch Nora. I'm gonna rewatch or try to rewatch all the Best Picture nominees this year. So I'm excited. I'm just waiting for that. But I'm excited for that. Two notes. Did you see, speaking of Lance Oppenheim, did you see his feature Some Kind of Heaven?
No, not yet.
Highly recommend. I'm excited for Ren Fair. I didn't know he made this. But you should check
I,
that
th-
out. Also,
I think he had like 2 documentaries this year. Like, how do
yeah, he
what?
did
How?
Sperm World.
Wow.
Also, I didn't see Sperm World, but
Yeah.
it's out there.
Good for him.
Um,
Good for him.
Oh, of course. I'll also mention, I forgot because it's not on Letterboxd, I watched Squid Game season 2. I watched it because
Oh,
I was gonna review it, and now I'm like, it was dog shit, like awful. So sad, so sad. How can a TV show? Well, I know how, because they wanted to make it 2 seasons, so they had to just create an extra season. But it's shocking that a show can take like 5 years to make, or however long it's been, and then produce something like this. But
damn.
you can probably just skip season 2 and just go straight into season 3, and I'm sure it's going to be fine. Okay, and before we go, I want to give the floor to a couple of Clapper's favorite contributors. Recently, we had our episode 200, where various people from Clapper's history sent in little audio messages to celebrate the occasion. It was the holidays. People are busy. I fully understand. So both Jacob Allen and Hillary White sent in audio messages after the episode was posted. And I didn't want those to go to waste, so I'm going to put them here at the end. So first, let's hear from Jacob Allen.
Hey, it's Jacob Allen here. Just wanted to say congrats to host Carson Timar for 200 episodes of the ClapperCast. All the various guests and co-hosts he's had on throughout the years here has really just made a podcast that is probably, in my opinion, the best for movie lovers and the most unique conversation you're going to find in the film podcasting sphere. So here's to another 200. Congrats again.
Thanks for the kind words, Jacob. Now let's hear from Hillary White.
Hi there. This is Hillary. I just wanted to record something very short, and I'm very thankful that I've been allowed to participate in not only reviewing for the site, but also participating in podcasts over the past, it's going on 4 years, which is quite a long time. It seems like the pandemic just happened last week, and the truth is it's getting on 4 years, 5 years, come next February. But I would say that that's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic. I happened to see something that Jack posted just asking people if they wanted to review films or if they want to talk about things, and I took a chance and I did it, and absolutely no regrets about that. So I definitely hope that I'll continue to participate over the next few years and keep contributing, keep talking, keep trying to bring something new to the table. And I can't thank you guys enough for letting me do that. It's one of the most fortunate things that have happened to me over the past several years. And I guess I could say that I've made some friends. I know we all live in different countries and we're different ages and we have different tastes, but we're talking to each other, and that's what makes Clapper special. So once again, thank you.
With that, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining me, Nick. What a great way to start the year. Where can we find your work on the internet?
You can find my writing on clapperltd.co.uk, my short films and videos on YouTube and Vimeo at Enjoy the Movies, my podcast, Anatomy of an Adaptation, streaming on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube at Enjoy the Movies. And also, yeah, if you want to follow me on social media, Instagram and Blue Sky at NikkiGra97.
And you can find me on Blue Sky and Letterboxd, just Carson Timar. A very exciting time on the podcast this new year. We'll be back on Patreon next week as we review 2020's The Invisible Man. Randy from Uncut Gems will be joining us for that, because that is previewing the next time we're on our main feed, where, guys, there is a release in the next 3 months I'm excited to talk about. We're going to be talking about the Wolfman, or just Wolfman, Lee Winnell's adaptation. Very curious about this film, but very excited to talk about it at the very least. And then we jump into my birthday double feature. 2 episodes for my birthday. First up, Paul Schrader's First Reformed. Secondly, we're going to be revisiting Weathering with You, the 2019, I want to say, anime film. I'll save my thoughts then, but I picked them for a reason. And then we have a great few months, guys. Mickey 17 is back on our schedule because it switched places with Sinners. So sorry, we won't be doing Sinners, but we will be doing Mickey 17. And there's just a bunch of fun old releases, new releases. I always love the beginning of the year on Clapper because we have so much time for older releases, because our new release market is a little thin with stuff I want to talk about. So I think it's going to be a really fun time, but we'll see you over on Patreon, and then we'll see you back for The Wolfman. Goodbye.